I'd always thought surprises were supposed to be fun, spontaneous, full of joy. But something about this one felt off, even before we left the driveway. My name's Michael Anderson. I'm 41 years old, live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I'm a husband and dad of two, Curtis, 15, and Sophie, 6. My wife, Rebecca, had been away in Boston for a week on some extended project with her firm, and I thought, why not take the kids up to surprise her for the weekend? The idea hit me while I was packing lunches one morning. Sophie asked if Mommy would be back in time for her dance recital next week, and when I said yes, she looked down at her sandwich and whispered, I miss her a lot. That was all it took. I booked the train tickets that night. Curtis was more skeptical at first. Shouldn't we tell her we're coming? He asked. Nope, I said, folding up the itinerary. It'll be a real surprise. She'll love it. Sophie clapped her hands like it was Christmas. Like a movie, she shouted. I tried not to show it, but a part of me was nervous. Rebecca had been weirdly distant on this trip, text unanswered, call straight to voicemail. At first, I figured she was buried in meetings. Then after 4 days of silence, I started to wonder. But I pushed those thoughts down. She was tired, that's all. These projects always sucked the life out of her. This trip would be our way of shaking things up, reminding her what she had waiting back home. We left Friday morning, bags packed and kids buzzing with excitement. I made peanut butter sandwiches for the train and brought extra crayons for Sophie. The weather was good, cool and crisp, just the way Rebecca liked it. It felt like the universe was on our side. Even with the excitement, there was this low thrum in my chest. Something uneasy. I kept checking my phone, sending little texts like, on our way to surprise you, and hope your meetings went great today, but nothing. Not a single reply. Curtis noticed. Still no response? I shook my head. She's probably just in a zone. These big pitches, they suck up every second. He nodded, but he wasn't convinced. That night, in our hotel room outside Boston, Sophie fell asleep curled up with her stuffed dolphin, and Curtis was quietly reading on the other bed. I sat on the edge with my phone in hand, refreshing our message thread like something would magically appear. Still nothing. I told myself not to overthink. Maybe she lost her charger. Maybe she was pulling late nights. Maybe nothing. I looked over at my kids, Sophie dreaming, Curtis glancing up now, and then like he could see the worry crawling up my spine. I smiled at him and said, she's gonna flip when she sees us. Yeah, he said quietly. Hope so. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. I wanted this to be a joyful surprise. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we were heading straight into something I wasn't ready to see. The train pulled into South Station just after 2 p.m. Sophie pressed her nose to the window as we slowed to a stop, her breath fogging the glass. Are we really here? She asked, eyes wide like she couldn't believe the skyline was real. Yup, I said, trying to muster some enthusiasm. We made it. Curtis hauled down the bags without being asked. He was quiet. He'd been quiet most of the ride, earbuds in, staring out the window like he was thinking about something heavier than math homework. The walk to the hotel wasn't long, but Boston traffic made everything feel slower. Sophie skipped ahead, pointing at cabs and pigeons. Curtis walked beside me, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes scanning every block. You okay? I asked him at one point. Yeah, he muttered. Just tired. But I knew that look. He was watching me. Like he was trying to read me before I could even admit something was wrong. The hotel was a modern glass building on the edge of Back Bay. Rebecca had mentioned it once in passing, something about it being close to her firm's Boston office. When we stepped into the lobby, the air conditioning hit us hard, and the smell of lemon polish and hotel coffee filled the space. I walked up to the desk, Sophie bouncing beside me, Curtis lingering a few steps back. Hi, I said to the receptionist. I was hoping to surprise my wife. She's staying here, Rebecca Anderson? She checked in a few days ago. The woman smiled. Of course, let me take a look. She typed something into her computer. Her smile didn't drop, but something in her posture changed. She hesitated. Just a second too long. I leaned in slightly. Everything okay? Yes, she said quickly. Yes, she's here. She checked in Tuesday. With a +1. My heart thudded. A +1. She nodded. Yes, that's what's listed on the reservation. She said it so casually, like she just confirmed Rebecca wanted an extra towel. I felt Curtis step closer behind me. I didn't turn around. My mouth felt dry. Is she in her room right now? I asked. I'm not sure, sir. We don't give out room numbers for privacy reasons, but I can call her if you'd like. I hesitated. Sophie tugged at my sleeve. Daddy? When do we get to see Mommy? I smiled down at her. Soon, baby. Let's get our room first. I booked a room 2 floors down from where I assumed Rebecca was. The receptionist avoided eye contact as I handed over my card. Inside the elevator, Sophie pressed all the buttons like it was a ride at the fair. Curtis stood stiffly, arms crossed. He looked up at me. She's here with someone, he said flatly. Curtis. You heard her. So did I. I stared straight ahead at the elevator doors. Don't jump to conclusions, I said. He didn't reply. When we got to our room, I turned on the TV for Sophie and told her to pick a movie. Curtis sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. I reached for my phone. My hands were shaking. And I called her again. This time, it rang. But she didn't answer. I waited until Sophie was fully engrossed in her movie and Curtis had his headphones on before I slipped out. I'm just grabbing some snacks, I told them, voice steady. Be back in a bit. Curtis looked up at me. He didn't say anything, just nodded. But I saw the suspicion in his eyes. He knew exactly where I was going. The elevator ride felt like it lasted forever. My heart pounded louder with each floor we passed. When I stepped into the hallway of Rebecca's floor, everything felt quieter, like the walls were listening. I stood outside her room for a solid minute before I even knocked. I didn't have a plan, just this gnawing need to know, to see it for myself. I knocked. No answer. Then, just as I was about to walk away, I heard movement. Footsteps. A voice. A man's voice. And then her voice. Soft. Laughing. The door opened. She was wearing a white bathrobe. Hair wet, skin pink from a recent shower. She stopped when she saw me, eyes wide, mouth frozen halfway through some greeting she hadn't finished. Michael, she said finally. Her voice cracked. I looked over her shoulder. The hotel room was dim, but I saw the shape of someone, a man, shirtless, rummaging through a suitcase at the end of the bed. My wife stepped forward, closing the door slightly behind her. Too late. Who is he? I asked. Michael, this isn't. Who is he? Her jaw tensed. He's a colleague. It's complicated. I laughed. It came out more like a cough. That's your explanation? A colleague. She looked back at the door. Can we not do this here? A moment later, the man stepped into view. Younger than me. Good-looking in that forgettable, gym body sort of way. He looked at me, confused. Everything okay? He asked her, then turned to me. Hey, you know she's married? I asked him, voice low. His face fell. Wait, what? Rebecca turned back to me, voice firm now. Michael, I didn't ask for you to come here. I know, I said. That's why it's a surprise. Her expression shifted, and for a moment, I saw guilt. Not remorse, guilt. The kind that shows up when you get caught, not when you do something wrong. You weren't supposed to find out like this, she said. Oh, so there was a plan? You were going to tell me after the trip? Or after the next one? She crossed her arms. I didn't want to hurt you. Rebecca, I said, you didn't just hurt me. You lied. To me. To our kids. The guy stepped back, clearly realizing he'd walked into something way over his head. I didn't know she was married, he muttered, before grabbing a shirt and disappearing into the bathroom. Rebecca sighed. Can we talk? Alone. I shook my head. I'm not here to talk. I came here to surprise you. With our kids. That stopped her cold. They're here, she whispered. In the room downstairs. Sophie's watching a movie. Curtis already figured it out. She blinked, eyes filling but never spilling over. Michael. I'm not going to blow up in the hallway, I said. Don't worry. Then I stepped back. I'm going back to them. You can decide what you want to do. But don't lie to them. Especially not to Curtis. She said nothing. I turned and walked away. My hands felt numb. The hallway stretched ahead of me like a tunnel. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe until I was back in the elevator. The truth was out. And nothing would ever be the same again. Rebecca knocked on our hotel room door about an hour later. I opened it, and there she was, clean clothes, makeup redone, smile glued in place like it was part of her job. If I hadn't seen her with my own eyes, I might have believed she just came back from a work meeting. Hey, sweeties, she said brightly, walking in like everything was fine. Sophie squealed and ran to her. Mommy, you're here. Rebecca bent down and scooped her up in a tight hug, kissing her cheek. Of course I'm here, baby. I missed you so much. Curtis didn't move from his spot near the window. He just stared, arms folded, jaw set. Hi, honey, she said to him, her tone softer. He didn't answer. Just turned and looked out the window again. I stood by the door, watching her play out the performance. Her voice, her posture, her carefully controlled warmth, it all made me want to scream. But I didn't. Not in front of the kids. Sophie grabbed her hand and tugged. Are you staying with us tonight? Rebecca hesitated just a second too long. I wish I could, sweetie, but I have a work dinner tonight. Sophie's face fell. But we came all the way here to see you. I know, Rebecca said quickly, brushing a hand through her hair. But this project is really important. I promise we'll have breakfast tomorrow, okay? Just us. Curtis turned then, sharp and cold. Yeah, real important. Rebecca froze for a moment, then forced another smile. I brought you guys something. She pulled a small bag from her purse. Inside were 2 Boston-themed keychains and a stuffed lobster for Sophie. She handed them out like peace offerings. Sophie hugged hers instantly. Thanks, Mommy. He's so soft. Curtis didn't take his. I'm good, he said. Rebecca's hand hovered, then slowly dropped. She turned to me. Can we talk? Just for a minute. I nodded and stepped into the hallway with her, pulling the door half shut behind me. The hallway was empty except for a cart of clean towels down by the elevator. She looked at me, her voice low and urgent. I'll talk to Curtis. I'll explain everything. No, I said. Don't lie to him. She blinked. I wasn't going to lie, like you didn't lie to me? Her mouth opened, but she didn't answer. Don't, I said again, softer this time. Not right now. She straightened her shoulders. I'm trying to hold it together for them. I laughed bitterly. For them? You're doing this for you. To save face. She didn't deny it. I'm taking them out to the harbor, I said. You go to your dinner. Do whatever you need to do. She nodded and walked away, heels clicking down the corridor like punctuation marks. Back in the room, I helped Sophie put on her jacket while Curtis sipped his own without a word. Where are we going? Sophie asked. The harbor, I said. Lights, boats, maybe some ice cream. She grinned. Curtis didn't speak the whole way down the elevator, but once outside, he walked beside me, close, like he wanted to make sure I didn't slip away too. We watched the city lights blink on one by one as night fell. It should have been magical, but none of us said it felt that way. Boston Harbor was beautiful that night, all glowing lights and reflections dancing on the water. Sophie ran ahead, chasing her own shadow, swinging the little stuffed lobster Rebecca had given her. Curtis and I walked slower, side by side, wrapped in a quiet that felt like a bubble about to burst. After a while, he finally said it. She's cheating, isn't she? I didn't answer right away. The words hung there between us, heavier than the wind coming off the water. Yeah, I said finally. She is. Curtis kept his eyes on the boats bobbing in the distance. How long? I don't know everything, I admitted. But a while. He nodded slowly, like he'd already guessed, and just needed it confirmed. I figured. You did. I mean, the way she's been acting. The weird calls. The trip. It didn't feel right. I stopped walking, turning to him. You shouldn't have to carry that stuff. I'm sorry. He looked up at me, his expression serious, not angry, not even shocked. Just older. Wiser than a 15-year-old should be. You didn't do anything wrong, he said. We watched Sophie climb onto a stone bench, arms out like she was flying. She yelled something about being a dolphin princess. For a moment, it made me smile. I wanted this trip to be something special, I said. Something she'd remember. Something we all would. She'll remember it, Curtis muttered. We sat on a nearby bench. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring down at the brick path. I don't know what's going to happen next, I admitted. But I want you to know I'm here. For you. For Sophie. Curtis didn't answer right away. Then he said, you should tell her. Sophie, I mean. Not all the details, but eventually. I will, I said. Just not yet. He nodded. She's still a kid. She shouldn't have to know all this. We sat in silence again, watching Sophie chase lights on the water. People passed us, tourists with cameras, couples holding hands, a guy selling glow sticks from a plastic bin. Curtis leaned back on the bench, exhaling hard. I hate her for doing this. Don't say that. I do, he snapped. She didn't just hurt you. She hurt us. I looked at him, really looked, and saw myself in that face. The same lines starting to form between his brows. The same way he clenched his jaw when trying not to cry. She's still your mom, I said gently. She stopped acting like it the minute she picked someone else. He didn't say anything else after that. We let Sophie eat ice cream while we sat there, letting the harbor wind try to carry away the weight of what we now knew. That night, as we headed back to the hotel, Curtis walked a little closer to me. He didn't take my hand. He was too old for that now, but I felt him there, solid and quiet beside me. And that, somehow, made me feel less alone. We got back to the hotel a little after 9. Sophie was half asleep on my shoulder, sticky fingers from the ice cream still curled around her lobster toy. Curtis walked behind me, quiet, dragging his feet just enough to let me know he was still angry, but not at me. I had just closed the room door behind us when there was a knock. I opened it to find Rebecca standing in the hallway, lips tight, arms crossed. She didn't even glance at the kids. She looked right at me. We need to talk. Now. I stepped out, pulled the door closed behind me, and followed her a few feet down the hall. She spun around, eyes flashing. You told him. I kept my voice low. He asked. I answered. Michael, she hissed, glancing around like someone might be recording. He's 15. You had no right. He had every right. I said, cutting her off. He lives in this family. He sees the cracks. And he deserved the truth. Rebecca shook her head in disbelief. You don't just dump something like that on a teenager. Do you have any idea what kind of damage you've done? Don't talk to me about damage, I said, stepping closer. You did that all by yourself. Her mouth opened, then closed again. For a second, I thought she might actually cry. But she didn't. I should have been the one to tell him, she said, softer now. But you weren't going to, were you? I asked. You were going to keep pretending. Smile for Sophie. Lie to Curtis. Act like nothing's wrong. I was trying to keep things normal, she snapped. Normal ended the second you opened that hotel room door and saw me standing there. She flinched, then looked away. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she muttered. That's the only honest thing you've said since we got here. She rubbed her temples, then dropped her hands, defeated. We need to talk. Just the two of us. Figure out what this means. I nodded. Fine. Tomorrow morning. After breakfast. She nodded slowly, turning to go. I'll be back at 8. Before she walked off, I added, Curtis doesn't want to talk to you right now. Don't push it. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't argue. She just walked back down the hallway, her heels echoing sharply against the carpeted floor. When I returned to the room, Sophie was already under the covers, yawning between sentences of a cartoon playing on TV. Curtis sat near the window again, headphones on, pretending not to have been listening. She's gone? He asked quietly once I sat down beside him. For now. He didn't look at me, just nodded. From across the room, Sophie called out sleepily. Is Mommy having dinner with her work people? Curtis's eyes flicked toward me, waiting. I swallowed. Yes, sweetheart. Something like that. She nodded, already halfway to dreamland. Curtis leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. I just sat there in the dim room, wondering how we were all supposed to get through breakfast together like this. I knocked on her door at 8:03 a.m. sharp. Curtis and Sophie were down at breakfast, Sophie blissfully stuffing pancakes into her cheeks, Curtis keeping guard like a teenager with a mission. I told him I needed to talk to his mom. Alone. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and said, We'll be in the corner booth. Rebecca opened the door like she'd been standing right behind it. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The room looked like it had been cleaned up in a rush. Bed made, suitcase zipped shut, everything too neat. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, her hair in a low ponytail. No makeup. For the first time since the surprise, she looked tired. Human. I sat in the chair by the window. She sat on the edge of the bed. For a few seconds, neither of us said a word. Then she started. It didn't start the way you think, she said. At first it was just talking. Texts. Late-night emails about work. I didn't respond. I was lonely, Michael, she went on. You and I, we haven't really been close in a long time. You mean I haven't been enough? I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was just hollow. She winced. That's not what I meant. But it's what you felt. She looked down at her hands. His name is Jason. He's a consultant for the firm. It started maybe 3 months ago. I blinked. 3 months. That meant Christmas. That meant she smiled at me across the dinner table while she was already giving herself to someone else. How many times? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know. More than once. Yes. I stared out the window. I couldn't even see the harbor anymore, just the parking garage across the street. I didn't want to hurt you, she said quietly. You didn't want to get caught. She flinched. I've been unhappy for a long time. I turned to her. So you cheated. That's your solution? Instead of talking to me, instead of asking for help, or therapy, or space, you jumped into bed with some guy you met at work. I didn't mean for it to get serious, she said. It just happened. I stood up. No, that's not how this works. You made a choice, Rebecca. Every time you lied. Every time you left the room to take his calls. Every hotel room. Those were choices. She started to cry. The silent kind. The kind where the tears just roll, no sound, no motion, only shame. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit the project. Please. I looked at her, and for the first time since we got to Boston, I saw her clearly, not as my wife, not as the woman I married, but as the person who broke something I didn't think could be broken. I'm taking the kids home, I said. Tomorrow. She stood. Michael. You can come back when you're ready to be honest with all of us. Until then, they stay with me. And us? She asked. What about us? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I don't know. Her shoulders sagged, like all the fight drained out of her. I never meant for this to happen. But it did, I said, stepping toward the door. And we don't get to pretend it didn't. Then I walked out. Downstairs, I found Curtis and Sophie at the booth. Sophie waved. Curtis just looked at me. I nodded once. He didn't smile, but he looked relieved. We were leaving in the morning. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be this. We got to Logan Airport early the next morning. Sophie bounced along beside me, dragging her tiny suitcase that made more noise than it should have. Curtis walked ahead, hands in his sweatshirt pockets, silent. Rebecca met us at the terminal. She looked like she hadn't slept. No makeup, hoodie pulled tight over her head. She barely looked like herself, or maybe she looked like herself for the first time in a long while. Sophie ran straight into her arms. Mommy, you came. I wouldn't miss saying goodbye, Rebecca whispered, squeezing her tightly. I stood a few feet away, watching them. Curtis didn't move. Rebecca looked at him next. Curtis. He gave her a brief nod. No hug. No words. Just enough acknowledgement to not be called rude. It hit her harder than if he'd yelled. I'm going to miss you, she said, voice cracking. Curtis looked away. Sophie glanced between us, sensing something. Why aren't you coming home with us, Mommy? Rebecca crouched down. I have to finish work here, sweetheart. Just for a little longer. But Daddy said the project's done. I held my breath. Rebecca looked at me, panic flickering in her eyes, then back at Sophie. There's more to wrap up, baby. Grown-up stuff. Oh, Sophie said, unsure. Okay. She didn't push. She was too young to understand what was really happening, but not too young to feel the cold shift in the air between us. Curtis sat down on a bench by the gate and put his headphones on. Rebecca walked over to me. Please call me when you get home. I will, I said. It was a lie. We both knew it. She nodded slowly. I'm going to make things right, Michael. I swear. I didn't say anything. I was tired of words. Words had been cheap for too long. Tell Curtis I love him, she asked. You can tell him yourself. She looked over at him, then back at me. He won't hear it from me right now. Then earn it back, I said. Sophie was waving her lobster toy at a nearby toddler, oblivious to the tension. Will you tell her? Rebecca asked, voice low. Not yet, I said. But soon. She'll ask. And when she does, I won't lie. Rebecca wiped at her eyes, then straightened her shoulders. I deserve this, she whispered. I didn't respond. Final boarding call. The gate agent smiled at us, waiting. I called to Curtis. Time to go. He stood, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and walked toward me. He didn't even glance at Rebecca. She reached out as we passed. Kurt. He didn't stop. Didn't even blink. Sophie turned and waved. Bye, Mommy. I love you. I love you too, baby, Rebecca choked out. Then we boarded. As the plane lifted off, Sophie pressed her face to the window, asking questions about clouds and snacks. Curtis pulled his hood over his head and leaned into the wall, pretending to sleep. I sat in the middle, looking straight ahead, heart pounding in my chest. I felt grief, anger, sadness. But underneath it all, I felt something else I hadn't expected. Resolve. We were leaving Boston broken, but not beaten. 3 weeks later, it was done. Rebecca and I sat on opposite sides of a plain wooden table in a quiet conference room, a notary flipping through the final pages. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and the clock on the wall clicked like it couldn't wait to be somewhere else. No lawyers. We'd agreed to keep it simple. She wore a gray sweater, hair tied back, barely any makeup. Her fingers trembled slightly as she signed the last document. That's it, the notary said, sliding the papers into a manila envelope. You're officially divorced. Neither of us spoke. Rebecca looked at me. Her eyes were red but dry. I never wanted it to end like this. I gave a small nod. Neither did I. But we were past wishing. The walk back to the parking lot was quiet. She followed me out, stopping by her car. How's Sophie? She asked. She's been asking fewer questions, I said. But she's still confused. I'd like to call her this weekend. I nodded. I'll let her know. She hesitated, then added, and Curtis. I looked her dead in the eye. He's hurting. But he's strong. Rebecca looked down. I wish I could fix it. You can't, I said gently. But maybe someday you can earn some of it back. She nodded slowly. Are you okay? I thought about lying. About saying yeah, just to get through it. But I didn't. I'm trying, I said. One day at a time. She walked away without another word, slipping behind the wheel and driving off. And that was that. When I got home, Curtis was on the couch, hoodie up, controller in hand. He paused his game and looked at me. Done? He asked. Done. He gave a tight nod and went back to his game. It was his way of saying he heard me. Understood. Sophie was in the dining room, coloring a picture of a castle. She looked up. Did you see Mommy today? I did, I said, sitting down beside her. Did she ask about me? She did. She misses you. Sophie smiled and went back to coloring. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope on my lap. The divorce decree. 2 names on paper, 2 signatures, and a whole history split in half. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. We weren't a perfect family. Maybe we never were. But now, there was a chance, a real chance, to build something honest. Something that didn't have lies in the walls. Curtis was quiet, but he stayed close. Sophie was still innocent enough to believe in good endings. And me? I was still standing. And that was enough. For now.